Network. I'm your host, Herman. We're here at the Masa 3G event in New York City. 3G brings together third-generation Holocaust survivors to talk about their family history and educate the community at large about the Holocaust. Let's take a closer look. Being a third-generation Holocaust survivor comes with great responsibility. I know that my grandparents survived the Holocaust, and for myself, I know that it's important to continue to educate the community at large of what my grandparents went through, and really to ensure that when you say never again, you really mean it. So tell us a little bit about 3G.
All right, so my name is Cohen. I'm on the board of 3G, and this is obviously something that's really important to me. I grew up my whole life, with the Holocaust in the background. It was so important to my grandmother, my mother, myself. It was like an underlying theme of my life, and I found that when I was getting older and really wanted to volunteer, this is what I wanted to do because it meant so much to me. So as grandchildren of survivors, we really have the responsibility of taking it to the next level. We all know that survivors aren't going to be around that much longer. We need to carry on their legacy, and the grandchildren have like a unique position to do so. We have a great program called WEDU, which is where grandchildren of survivors tell their grandparents' stories in school classrooms. So it will replace the survivors that unfortunately won't be with us that much longer, but it provides a forum for us to share their stories with younger people and connect to them as third generation are younger themselves.
And when you hear the stories of Holocaust survivors, and then you obviously you have that connection. The 3G has that opportunity to give a place for the next generation to really connect in a unique way. So how do people normally get connected to your organization?
People hear about us on the internet through other Jewish organizations. We send out a lot of emails and communicate with other Jewish organizations in New York. I've been surprised over the time that I've been involved in 3G how many people are drawn to us as a Jewish organization that's different than a lot of other ones in the city, because the people that come have a unique connection that is even unique among Jewish people themselves. People that are grandchildren of survivors grew up with something unique about them that they may not share with every Jew in New York, but they share with the third generation Jews. And it's sort of a sense of understanding of what you've been through. And people are really motivated and really want to get involved. I'm so impressed by how many people have come to us and want to get further involved, want to carry the torch of their grandparents, share their stories, keep the memory alive. And third generation is unique. We're 20s, 30s around. We're plugged into social media. We're really active. We want to, make the world better. And we are the last living link to no survivors. So we are at a unique advantage to spread it to the community at large.
What does 3G mean to you?
3G is an organization I got involved with recently. I ended up at a Shabbat dinner that was put on by 3GNY, and I found out that there was an organization for grandchildren of Holocaust survivors to help promote their grandparents' legacies and tell their grandparents' stories, since we're probably the last generation with a living link and a connection to Holocaust survivors, which is actually very sad, which is why I think that this is a very important organization and a very important task for us to carry on.
Why do you think it's so important now to get involved in this type of initiative?
Well, all the Holocaust survivors are unfortunately dying off, so even though when we were younger, every year on Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, we had a Holocaust survivor, someone come in and speak to us in school. Unfortunately, the next generation is not going to have that, because the reality is that there are fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors left to tell their stories personally. So I think it's important for the people who have connections with Holocaust survivors to continue and tell their stories.
So thank you so much for having me here. Leora, thanks for the introduction. I don't even know if I'm esteemed, but I'm definitely here. But anyways, I got involved with WEDU about a year and a half ago, and we kind of sat around a table in one of the first classes to discuss, what does this program mean to you? Why'd you get involved with this program? And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. My mother passed on an email that spoke about WEDU. She knew I was into the Holocaust, into my grandfather's story. She said this might be a good thing for you to get involved with, and I did. And one of the first questions was, when did you first learn about your grandfather's experience? And I gave this answer that I said, I once saw a film where it was the son of a survivor, and they asked, when did you first hear about what happened in the camps? And he said, I don't even remember. I had been told this story from the day I was born. It was as if I was born with this knowledge. And I almost felt like that was something that spoke really true to me. I don't know when I first heard the story, but all I knew is I knew it, and I thought it was important to share with others. So, growing up in a somewhat Jewish neighborhood, I went to school with kids whose grandparents were survivors, and they had that kind of personal reflection when you read it in a textbook about the Holocaust, but I knew there were obviously millions of students who didn't. So the fact that people like Leora and others involved with WEDU were going to get us into those types of classrooms really, really appealed to me. I think I've been to maybe 3 to 5 classes now. You walk in, depending on what class you're going to, sometimes they have this kind of quizzical look on their face. You're Jewish? Yes, I was Jewish, and I tell them about my grandfather's story. And you can see, the start of the class a little rambunctious. As you tell their story, they're more and more engrossed, and by the end of the class, with at least some of the kids, you can tell this is going to be something they're going to remember. So to me, I can't even tell you what this experience has meant to me, and I hope it's meant a fraction of that to the students themselves, because it's obviously a great program for many, many reasons. But again, all my thanks to people like Leora for getting us in there, because I think there's benefits on both sides of the table.
The Holocaust has been a central part of who I am, and that's what I'm studying now in my master's program. But after college, I decided to go to Israel and on the Masa program, Career Israel, and they found me a match at Yad Vashem, which was my dream job. And as a result, when I came back to the States, I knew that I wanted to focus on Holocaust education. But to be honest, my family had a very positive history, and they were mostly able to emigrate before the start of the war. So when I got an email about 3GNY's WEDU program, I decided to look into it and try it out. And I learned so much more than I could have ever hoped. Most people, most likely think that you know about your grandparents' story. And I thought I did until I called my grandmother up one day in November, and I asked her for a favor. And as a favor, I said, can you please tell me your story, what happened when you grew up in Vienna? And she was in Vienna until she was 16, and was able to leave in November of 1939. So she answered very bluntly that when the Nazis entered Austria, that was the first day that her father didn't go to work. And they lived for a year and a half in hiding. And luckily, the superintendent's sons, who actually were members, one was a member of the SS and one was a member of the SA, they helped them survive by telling the Nazis that there were no Jews in the building. And after a year and a half of hiding, they were able to leave, and they escaped through Italy onto a ship to New York. And she struggled a lot adjusting to the U.S., but I think the most remarkable part of the story is that nobody in my family knew this history about her, and I only found it out in November. And I was the one to break it up.
When did you find it out?
I found it out in November, this past November. And I told the story to my father, who told it to his siblings, and nobody had known that she had such a traumatic experience. And we were all raised, my father and his siblings, and then my father passed it on to me and my siblings, that we shouldn't buy any German products and we shouldn't go to Germany and we shouldn't go to Austria. And I had no understanding why. And all of a sudden, 2 months ago, it finally clicked, and now I have a better sense of growing up as a third generation, and that my grandmother actually is a survivor, and there are different types of survivors. And so it's definitely enhanced my studies. And I'm going into Holocaust education, and I hope to use her stories when I go into classrooms. And I haven't been to a classroom yet with the WEDU program, but I'm really looking forward to it and hoping to make an impact for these students.
3G is helping young professionals connect to their roots and to explore what it means to be a third generation Holocaust survivor. And as a board member, what does it mean to you seeing these people around us getting involved and making a difference?
I think it's a very exciting and also difficult time to be part of 3GNY. We're the last living link to survivors, and we have an incredible responsibility to carry our family story. And that's a lot to think about and a lot to work through. At the same time, we're incredibly excited and fortunate to have so many young people interested in taking ownership of their family stories, learning what it means to carry a legacy of something that you yourself never experienced. You can hardly relate to some of the stories and the tragedies of what went on, but still finding the ability to carry a story, carry an experience, and share it with people that maybe know a little bit about the war, maybe have never even met a Jew before, and just to make this about a human story and its survival and the power of carrying that forward and activating this generation to own their family history.
One of the important parts of Lador Vadorj, from generation to generation, is telling those stories, making those connections. Saying, when you say, like, you know, my grandmother, grandfather went through the Holocaust, it impacts everyone's family differently. How has it impacted your life, and how have you seen this program influence the younger generation's lives?
How much time do we have? Well, I'm the grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors, but I grew up in a family that really never spoke about the war. My parents are immigrants. I'm the first American in my family, but I always knew that there was something different, something other about my experience, my parents' experience, my grandparents' experience. Only when I got to be a teenager did I force my grandmother, essentially, to speak to me about her story. My grandmother is 85 years old and fiercely phenomenal, but it took her, I would say, 65 years to share her story. It's affected me in more ways than I can explain or articulate, but I will say there's been a presence on my shoulder, inarticulated, not articulated, for as long as I can remember, saying that my name is Leora Ariella and I'm named for my great-grandfather who didn't survive. So it's affected me in my choices consciously and subconsciously. The obvious manifestation is my involvement with 3GNY and helping to execute the WEDU program. But I mean, I've been trying to write a book about it. It's fiction, but the intergenerational play of survivors. My husband is the child of a survivor, so it's affected me in more ways than I can ever really know.
As you can see, 3G provides the opportunity for young professionals to connect to their roots and educate the community at large about the Holocaust. This is Herman, and thank you for watching.